Okay, seriously though, before I actually get started, I have the opportunity to say one thing to a crowd that I think I've waited my entire life to say. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. In all seriousness though, I hope everyone has enjoyed just the awesome weather. Thank you all for coming out, just watching everything. I don't know. Anyway, I look out there right now and I see a lot of faces that I do know, but I also see some faces that I don't know. So for any of you who may not know me, consider yourself lucky. Seriously though, for anyone who may not know me, my name is Jefferson Daubitz. I'm a sophomore at Mizzou, double majoring in political science and geography. A few of you may or may not know this about me, but I'm actually not from Missouri originally. I came here for school. I'm originally from the beautiful city of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Oh, Taylor.
I'm just chilling in Cedar Rapids.
Yes, I am from that Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Contrary to popular belief, I actually did not grow up on a farm. I grew up in suburbia. I come from a very average middle-class family full of very above-average height people. Taylor. There they are. I'm the third of 4 kids, but I'm arguably the favorite. Or at least I'm objectively the tallest. A couple other things that you probably need to know about me since we know each other a little bit closer, even though they are in no way necessary to this talk. I have a really weird thing for peanut butter, coffee, and beautiful Catholic churches. I cannot wait to be a dad one day, and the 4-letter word for the thing over your head right now is a roof, and it is pop, not soda. Another thing that you may or may not know about me is actually 2 weeks ago to the day today, I had surgery done on my mouth. I didn't know about it at the time, about a year and a half ago. One of the fillings in a molar broke, and since it's actually impossible to scrub your toothbrush underneath a filling, a massive cavity had been growing there for that entire year and a half, and I had to have it removed. Now, I think a lot of you may have heard me talking about the discomfort and pain that this surgery caused me, and it was very easy for me to talk about that. I was able to trust my surgeon, and I trusted that people were aware of what was going on, and so I had the reassurance to know that it was going to one day heal. Now, I would assume that my tooth there is just one example of physical pain and wounds that you've heard about. I would bet that within the last week you've talked to someone about the fact that they were sick or they got injured. And it's really easy to do this because it isn't personal. It isn't anyone's fault that physical pain manifests. And so we're ready and willing to do that. But what I would also bet you is that you are aware that I'm not going to stand here for 20 minutes and talk to you about physical human wounds. As fascinating as that would be, you're correct, because I left science classes a long time ago. It is, however, imperative that we establish a difference between our understanding of physical human wounds and the very real and very heavy truth of emotional and spiritual wounds. Now, I'm going to admit, this is not an easy thing to talk about nor listen to. C.S. Lewis reminds us of that when he says, mental pain is less dramatic than physical pain, but it is more common and also more hard to bear. The frequent attempt to conceal mental pain increases the burden. It is easier to say, my tooth is aching, than to say, my heart is broken. The frequent attempt to conceal mental pain increases the burden. It is hard to hide our physical wounds, and there's nothing really embarrassing about them. Our emotions and our spirit, though, are uniquely human and therefore make us the most self-conscious. But our private mind is ours. Our emotions are ours. Nobody can enter without our permission, and so it can be easy and almost comfortable to keep those to ourselves. But as comfortable as it seems, it can produce devastating results. Now, we all suffer in different ways. Some of us struggle with our wounds in self-inflicted sin, others in wounds with relationships with other people. Myself personally has struggled since my freshman year of high school with a mental illness. Eventually, in the summer of 2017, about a month and a half before I started school here, I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder that induces panic attacks. If you've never had a panic attack, it can feel almost very similar to a heart attack. In fact, that's actually how I received my diagnosis. After a chest x-ray, blood tests, and EKG, and about 4 hours in an exam room, I was left with no physical diagnosis as to why my chest hurt and I could not breathe. And so they just referred me back to my primary care physician to figure it out. But sometimes panic attacks come and just leave your mind racing, filling your mind with every possible worst case scenario, every possible thought. And it doesn't matter if you're alone or you're with your friends, or even if you're in the middle of a dance floor, a panic attack comes when it wants to, and you want nothing more than out of your own brain. So, in a desperate attempt to heal myself, when I got to school, I refused to let myself grow close to any one individual or group of people. I went out every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, putting on a show to the world while I felt my own soul being dragged under by these currents. I would show up to Mass here every Sunday night and leave as quickly as possible, knowing that I was unworthy of the love and perfection that I saw here. Now, eventually I grew discontent with this. I tried my best to make connections that I saw those around me making. And make no mistake, I made those connections. I became friends with some of the greatest people that I've ever met. A lot of them are sitting in this room here tonight. We grew in our relationships, and for a fleeting moment, I was happy. But my previous attempts to conceal my pain soon caught up with me. I told myself that since I wasn't friends with them since the beginning of the year when I was trying to put on a show to the world, that they only talked to me out of pity. My mind convinced myself that I wasn't worthy of their love, that whenever I spoke to them, reached out, or tried to be their friend, that I was annoying and burdening them. And so when things began to change in my life, when I began to take on more responsibilities, activities, decided to double major, and I began to face financial situations that I could have never imagined, they already added to a confusing and hurting mental situation. When some of those friends violated the trust that I'd placed in them with my whole heart, I broke. But when one person's heart breaks, it is hardly isolated. Grasping for a way out, I began to cut people off and out of my life. I stopped talking to those that I thought had slighted me, those that I thought had done me wrong. The people that I had loved, that I do love, began to feel the effects of my scrambling. And whether it be intentional or not, I began to hurt those around me. I grew uncomfortable, isolated, unloved by some of my best friends, no matter how much fun we were having together. And I realized it. I had broke. I had broken more than previous times in my life. I saw no way out of my situations, some of which were completely fabricated by a mental illness I did not ask for, some of which were external situations out of my control, and some of which were of my own making. And I wanted out. This led to a 3-day period where I panicked almost every single day. Now, thankfully, it happened a lot when I was around my friends. And I remember during one of them, I calmly walked outside, broke down. I felt the wounds in my soul tearing open, desperate for a way out, telling me there was no way out. By the grace of God, one of my best friends walked outside right then, saw me sitting there facing down this sheer agony. And I remember telling him I didn't know if I was going to be okay, and he responded, "Jeff, do you believe in God?" And I looked at him, tears in my eyes, and I didn't know how to respond. And that makes me stop. Because you see, here's the thing. If you believe in God, that means you believe in the purposes for your life. And your life includes everything, your successes and your failures, your healthy aspects and your wounds. It means you believe in the purpose of your wounds. And trust me. Please trust me. I know how hard it is to believe that, but you must know that your wounds have purpose. That night I just described to you was not 2 years ago, it was 2 weeks ago. And so you must know that you are not alone in your struggle to grasp that. So what's the purpose? One of the beautiful things about Catholic tradition is that we see our pain and suffering as an opportunity to grow closer to Christ himself. And sometimes it does take that pain and that suffering to know what Christ is calling us to. Lewis tells us this when he says, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks to us in our conscience, but shouts to us in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. And I realize that seems so counterintuitive. How can our darkness, our shame, our wounds unite us to the divine? And we think this because pain and suffering are profoundly human emotions. The divine doesn't suffer the way a human being does. Until he did. When God became man, he did so to reunite our fallen nature with the divine nature. But make no mistake, he did not come to rescue us, he came to redeem us. He did not come to remove our wounds and our pain. He came to us so that our pain may be united to his love in the eternal. And he chose to partake in the human aspects of life, including suffering and death. And in doing so, he united our wounds with his. And when his wounds became one with ours, he offered the chance to let us go even deeper still than that. Not only were we called to suffer with him, we were called to be fully loved by him. Back in November, I was in a very dark position with a lot of relationships, with a lot of people that I love very much. And I remember sitting before him in the tabernacle, angry, yelling, "Love isn't supposed to hurt." But really, what a naive thing to say or to even think, because it is, and it does. His sacrifice of the cross, that ultimate act of love, hurt. It killed him. And since it hurts to love, we can reason that it will hurt to be loved. And that is because we are created by the Father to be so much more than what our fallen nature leads us to believe. We are created to be loved. In The Problem of Pain, Lewis also writes, "We are, in very truth, a divine work of art, something that God is making, and therefore something with which he will not be satisfied until it has a certain character." When we recognize that, we realize that our wounds are meant to draw us close to him, to draw us into his perfect love, because there is nothing that unites us more to the divine love of the Trinity than the human wounds that Christ suffered. And that will be hard. I know that. It hurts to transform. But love, especially that of the divine, demands nothing less. And despite our wounds, loving us is all he does. Therefore, and solely because we are loved by him, we have a purpose. And what's actually funny is that purpose is nothing more and nothing less than to let ourselves be loved by him. Our wounds, therefore, are vital to that love. And it is imperative that we let our wounds be united to his of the cross, to share in that ultimate symbol of his human suffering, because without them, we lose an essential aspect of what unites us to God through the Son. And this is hard to grasp. When we're lost and when we're hurting and we see no way out, it is hard to see this. And therefore, we must not accept this as an emotional truth, but rather as an intellectual one. If we do this, he will do the rest. Because as summed up by mere Christianity, although our feelings come and go, his love for us does not. It is not worried by our sins, our indifferences, and therefore it is quite relentless in its determination that we shall be cured of those sins, at whatever the cost to us, at whatever the cost to him. We must, therefore, give it all to him. All our pain, let it be united in one with his pain, because we are made for eternal life. We are made to be loved. Our wounds are merely the means to accomplish both of those ends. Your pain has a purpose. My pain has a purpose. And it's all his purpose. So, kind of what we're going to do right now is there's a very real truth that you cannot allow him into your wounds and your pain if you do not first acknowledge that you are wounded and where you are wounded. And so underneath your chairs, there's just a sheet of paper, and you're going to be the only one that sees this. We're not collecting them, but I ask you to acknowledge those wounds, to write them on the blank side of that paper, pray with it, and join your wounds to his.